We're going to move towards the panel discussion now, but I'll just make an announcement or two before we do that. One, I just want to let you all know that interpretation is available. So at the bottom of your screen, you should see a globe, and you can choose the language of your choice once you click on that. And there's English and Spanish available. And then also a reminder that if you had any questions that you wanted us to ask the panel, you can put those in the chat and send those to me, Samantha Sanchez, and we will try to get to as many questions as possible. If there were any terms or topics discussed in the film that you wanted more clarity on or wanted to learn more about, feel free to send those questions to either me or to Rosie, our tech support. And we'll do our best to send some resources over or define any terms or anything like that. Rosie, our tech support, is also here to help with any interpretation issues. Okay, let's see. Next, we're going to hear from Madeline Jean Forty, who's our executive director and also a panel member this evening. And she's going to give a short reflection on the film, and that'll kind of lead us into the panel discussion. And once Madeline gives the reflection, we'll introduce all the panel members will introduce themselves as well. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. You know, when I saw this documentary a year ago, it was so striking to me personally, just for my own personal reasons, but also because it really put into words very clearly why CORE exists and why we do what we do. Because what I gained from the film so clearly was that it's so important for people to have safe spaces and opportunities to heal, and that we all know trauma in our own personal lives, and it's imperative for us to be able to have those opportunities to heal and to reconnect with our wholeness, because we're all born whole. So thank you. I think the other piece for me was how important it is for us as a society to become trauma informed, so that everybody has an opportunity to come back to that place of wholeness. So thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you, Madeline. And then now, if we could just have all the panel members say their name, introduce themselves, their current job title, and then their connection with CORE. Steve, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Steve Oley, and I am on CORE's planning committee, strategic planning. I work one floor down at Walker's Point Community Clinic. I'm the colleague to the left. Mandy's place in her role as family support specialist there. We're both mental health therapists, but that's the title that we're working. Basically, we see a lot of people who have experienced trauma. Some sort of stories, journey with them.
Yes, it's me. My name is Mandy, and I am a therapist at Children's Hospital. And I'm also a therapist in an outpatient practice called Clara Healing Institute in Wauwatosa. And my connection to CORE is that I came to CORE in 2012 with my own trauma healing. And then from 2014 until 2020, I was a staff member at CORE, and was the
Hi, my name is Erika Rivo Gomez. I'm a bilingual mental health therapist, actually working at Catholic Charities of Milwaukee. I am a certified as a trauma specialist and working with trauma for already 10 years. I've worked with CORE El Centro in collaboration. Always, I believe in, in alternative therapies to help survivors of trauma. So I always saw the importance of working with CORE El Centro. And we, they refer people for psychotherapy with me. I refer people with them. And it's still, we are working together.
And then I suppose I already introduced Madeline as our executive director, but she's our fourth panel member tonight. I'm going to go ahead and be asking the questions to the panel members. And I'm also just going to encourage organic conversation. So I might direct a question towards you, but please feel free to just jump in, and you all have so much knowledge to share. So we're really grateful. So I'm actually going to start with a question that's for the whole panel, just kind of a reflection on the film. So any initial reactions to the film that you want to share? What are things you wish the movie would have highlighted, added, or changed? So any kind of just general reflection or anything you were really happy to see highlighted? Just some general reflection.
Well, for me, something that really reflected, resonated with me about the movie was that how really people is able to survive. Working with trauma for all these years have helped me to see, the wisdom in people. Like Gabor Mate says, I've seen, people bring, rediscovering themselves, I've seen them reconnecting with themselves. And when they are able to do that, they are able to reconnect with, the outside world, relationships. So yeah, definitely the movie reminds me of the beauty of people. Mm-hmm. That specifically, that underneath we all are human beings.
Okay. Yeah. So what I liked about the film was his emphasis on the importance of listening. Gabor Mate would call it compassionate inquiry, and he demonstrated that a lot in the film. But I mean, he would say that when the trauma happened, you as an individual had somebody like that who you felt loved you, cared for you, and was willing to listen to you, then the long-term consequences of that trauma would probably exist. So his job and others' jobs is to be there, to be that passionate inquirer, the listener, the carer, so that people can do that. So that was really good. One of the things that I think that they left out or could have emphasized more is just the whole idea of embodiment and movement as part of the way of healing trauma. So people, I'm sure, may have heard of Vessel. He's done a lot of study that with something like yoga, the trauma is bodily related, and body mastery through yoga can be really, really helpful. So, that's probably not Gabor's way so much, and it would be Vessel's way, but I think a balance of the two is probably pretty important. So it's one thing I would emphasize if I was making a film.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, and that's why I wrote my brain, because I felt like that was something, my brain. I want to show it to you all, because definitely maybe a little bit of how trauma works in our brain and body, and that connection mind-body. Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's too much trauma. Really, we talk about trauma, we can take hours and hours and hours. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that is kind of a good segue into the next question, or the next thing I hope all of you experts can help with is, is defining trauma, and how do you think the movie defined trauma? How do you define trauma? Erica, you have your brain, so anything you want to like explain to us? I think, you know, at CORE we talk about trauma a lot, so I feel like I hear about it a good amount, but that's my world, and we don't always, and we only know what we know. So if you could just share some of your definitions of trauma, we'd really appreciate that.
I think one of the things that the film did really well too was, and this also answers the question you just asked, is that it dispelled the myth that trauma is just something horrible like a disaster or a war or sexual assault, something like that, that we have in the past thought of as like the defining trauma moments, but rather that it's like it's not just being hurt, but it's like being alone with the hurt. And that it starts already when a child is crying, and like all it takes is a parent that's not connected to his or her emotions and leaving this child to just cry, and that can be a trauma. So when people have come to me and they're like, well, nothing bad ever happened to me, I don't have trauma, I think we all do, because we can all remember a time where we were hurt or sad or lonely and we were invalidated. We were not heard, not seen. So it doesn't normalize, I don't like that word, but like it makes it so that we don't feel so alone in it. Like, well, I didn't have anything happen to me. Why do I feel like this? Or that like, yeah, this happened and this makes sense, because I think we need to know that what our experiences that we've had make sense. We have to have a meaning for things.
Takes a lot of the shame out of it.
Yes.
So my definition is, I think, fairly simple in the sense that trauma is when you experience something that sort of slams against your belief system or your regular life experience. So like I think we're sort of can be born in an ideal way. We're like children of God, and so ready to be loved, and having a sense of that safety should be your reality, and then safety's not, or you're with your buddy in a war zone and to believe you're going to survive, and then your buddy doesn't and you lose your leg, or you believe that your spouse is going to be faithful and then he or she's not. Those are traumatic experiences that sort of you have a belief system and then it's banged against by the world, by reality, by the way of the world. So that's the trauma itself. And then it's really what I think what Gabor says, what happens after that trauma that can cause or not cause the long-term disabling symptoms that we have.
Yeah, I agree with that, Steve, because I really believe when we're born, we're very deeply connected to the divine, and then life begins to happen. And to me, those life experiences kind of separate us sometimes from that core essence of who we are. And then it's our journey back to that place of reconnecting with that place of wholeness, because we're born whole. And I think trauma takes us away from that. And then our journey is to find safe places, safe people that can help us reconnect with that divine essence of who we are.
Yeah, there are many definitions of trauma, but all go to like a point, like a specific, definition that is that trauma is not really the past. It's not really the event that we experience. traumas, the imprint, what, your body got, from that situation. And not only the body, but also the brain, culturally trauma, what happens in this area, very, very deep in the brain, that is called the limbic system and the reptilian system. Those are the ones who really get impacted because they work with the memories. And trauma is really, when our brain, because we are so stressed, our brain cannot process those memories. So what the brain has to do, okay, so I send implicit memories. Implicit memories are the memories that don't have words, that don't have images, but we feel. So sometimes that's why, people say, I don't remember, nothing happened to me, maybe no, maybe, part of my brain doesn't have the images, but my body, has those memories, has those implicit memories. So sometimes, after trauma has passed, those implicit memories come with emotions. Sometimes I get so angry and I don't know why. Well, maybe it's not anger. Maybe anger is a memory. Maybe, a stressful situation, takes me to having catastrophic thoughts. So maybe it's not a catastrophic thought. Maybe it's the memory, that you have because of what happened to you. Fear of attachment, sometimes that in our problems in our relationships, it's not because I'm not able to have a relationship. It's maybe because in my childhood, I have attachment, trauma. My caregivers were able maybe to be present for me for any reason. It is not about judgment, but so it's about memories. That is very strong.
Thank you guys so much. This next question I have is, I guess really for all of you as well, but I thought, so basically, are there different types of trauma? We've defined trauma in this big sense, but is there short-term trauma, long-term trauma? Is there anything you want to reflect on about that?
Well, basically, there are two ways that, you can classify trauma. On one group is the symptoms that you have. So you can have acute trauma. So acute trauma usually are the symptoms that you get when you have what incident trauma. Maybe a car accident, maybe an assault, So you can have those reactions of trauma, and of course, those are not comfortable, but they tend to get, if you work on them, they tend to get, heal really fast. Then we have the chronic trauma. So chronic trauma is usually when you have experienced repeated, trauma. For example, you experience domestic violence. So you are there, maybe you are with your partner every day, experiencing that physical or verbal or psychological abuse. So of course, your body is going to feel that you are not safe. So symptoms tend to get a little bit stronger, if I can say. And we have complex trauma. Complex trauma usually is when trauma starts when you were a child, usually attachment trauma, neglect, poverty, or the things that you could have experienced as a child. And, sometimes, it goes for years, even until adulthood. So that is one way. The other way that you can define trauma, that you can say the types of trauma is by events, or by ages, so Immutable trauma, if you are in utero, your mother for some reasons, is experiencing, for example, domestic violence, so that can happen, that can pass to the baby. Developmental trauma is all the events, the traumatic events that you can experience while you are in childhood and in teenagers, in teenage years. We can have also grief trauma, when we have a very, very like a strong loss, somebody dies that it was, very impacted me so much. We can have historical and collective trauma, COVID, when the community, is experiencing, when a war, Holocaust, when the community is experiencing. We can have attachment trauma, when unfortunately our relationships, cause trauma now, and then it's difficult to have a relationship. And vicarious or secondary trauma, so that providers, people that work with people, that have experienced trauma, can also they can pass, to us. And that is, I think, sorry, I'm talking too much, sorry.
Yeah, one of the things I think that, Mandy, you said earlier that I think is really, really key is that there are different types of trauma. We often think of them as the more like dramatic or, the physical abuse, sexual, all of those kinds of things. But the death of a parent could be really traumatic for a child very early on, could be a sickness, a sibling who's been sick, and you then don't get any attention, or you could have been sick. Bullying. So there's a lot of different ways that trauma will manifest itself. Yeah, divorce, I think, is huge. And so just recognizing that when you look at it from that standpoint, most of us have been impacted by trauma in our lives.
The other important issue to mention is the huge traumatic impact of racism in our society. Both the historical trauma of slavery, but then all the ways that we've continued with white supremacy.
Yes,
it's traumatized our whole culture and society, especially the people who walk in a society that believes they're less than.
Yes.
That's true.
Right.
And also, we need to mention intergenerational trauma.
Yes.
Our ancestors, they experienced and have been research that shows, that we get some of the suffering, in our genes.
That really is a great lead into one of the questions that was sent in the chat, was to mention kind of, what is that intersection of race and trauma, and how can we best support anybody who walks in our doors who have experienced like intergenerational trauma. That just sounds like a big thing. So I don't know if you guys could have any thoughts on that.
I always remember a conversation that happened in our staff meeting between a Latinx person and African-American woman. And the Latinx woman said, why is it that it seems like the people who are the angriest when they come in are the Black men? Said that. And the African-American nurse practitioner looked at her and just very thoughtfully said, I think your assumption is that there isn't any racism going on here. And the men that you're talking about, again, I don't want to generalize, the men that you're talking about probably assume there is. And there's a chasm there. How can you come together and heal that? You believe there's not, and these men that you're talking about believe there is. And that's where you're both starting from. Probably they've experienced plenty of it. So in answer to your question, I think it would be, how do we continue to create a sense of safety that conversations like that can have? That would be fairly, fairly key. And then where it gets brought up, like, okay, this seems like a microaggression or a macroaggression. what can we do to change our caring model that may not be so caring, may not be so conscious of what's happening?
Go ahead, please.
I think part of that consciousness also has to include that this system and those of us who have benefited from it, those of us who look like me, have also continued that system, and that it's broken, and that we have to recognize how it's broken so that we can meet people where they are in a system that's already been, like, we've perpetuated it, but recognizing that, like, oh, we might have to change the way that we think. We might have to look at the ways in which we can be less of the professionals and more of the learners.
So,
Yeah, I just want to say that, like, with most of traumatic events, like, for example, sexual abuse, domestic violence, racism, those are topics that sometimes we don't want to talk about. That let's, be quiet, and, and if we try to talk about, oh, the course, or you are attacking me, or, so first is that, in ours to start being aware, or our own, biases, or our own prejudices, of our own, experiences, because even, people of color, and I have to say, I'm Latina, but also I have to recognize what is my privilege, I have documents, so I have a privilege too. I can go to my country whenever I want to visit my family. So it's starting with everyone, and be able to talk about it, and to be able to say, yeah, this is happening, this is real. And when our clients come to us and express, I feel like I was, judged, or, because of my skin color, or because of my, how I speak, or, so let's not question them. Just let's be open. Let's talk about it.
yeah, I think doing the personal reflection and looking at how the institutions have really built in racism over the years and centuries, basically, and just being able to begin talking about how have those systems been set up, and really beginning to even talk about how that benefits me as a white person, and then how do we begin to undo those systems in a way that make the systems more inviting for all.
Thank you guys for reflecting on that. And I think it's interesting that it came up naturally and it came up in the chat. So I think that was important. It's 7:45, but I'm just going to throw one more question out there, and then we can wrap it up. And we totally understand if anybody needs to go. And we are recording this, so we'll share the link later to the panel discussion. So one last question for you all in your work. What are some different ways that you have seen trauma manifest itself that are seen by society as shameful, but are totally normal reactions? I think Gabor Mate did a good job of really pushing that those reactions are normal, but you guys could reflect more on that would be great.
One of the pieces I liked that he talked about when he talked about addiction, and he really looked at addiction in a much more larger landscape than just the traditional drug and alcohol piece. He talked about work, he talked about eating, he talked about shopping, gambling, all the different ways that it can manifest in our lives. And to me, that was a way to really just open our eyes to how addiction is so prevalent in our world. And having deep roots in our life experiences. You know, I think it's a coping mechanism that we all embody one way or another.
Mhm. I think coping doesn't necessarily have to be an addictive like behavior either. And or it could be an addictive behavior that we don't see as an addiction. I work with kids, so I don't see as much in terms of like addiction in terms of drugs and alcohol as maybe Erica or Steve do. However, I see kids who have like what have been labeled as behavior disorders. And so they are acting out, or they've been like labeled by teachers in school and like as like, okay, this behavior is a problem. Well, all behavior serves a purpose. So this behavior somehow is giving this child something that he or she is not getting at home, not getting from the world around him, not getting from like internally in terms of like what's, you know, his needs are not being met. So what are they doing and how is it inconveniencing us? Like, you know, are they hitting or yelling or throwing tantrums? Like, what is that giving to them? Like, what is it that they need that we as the grown-ups in their lives are not giving them, or the environment? So that's how I see trauma manifest itself. So the clients that I work with most is in the behaviors that we've seen as like undesirable. Well, yes, to us, but not to this little kid. Like, I got to do this because otherwise I don't feel safe.
Yeah, what I've seen is, for example, when the client, when the person, the person, you know, is going through a traumatic situation, for example, sexual abuse and assault, physical abuse, or when it's gone in the moment, or even after, you know, when it remembers and gets this reaction, there is a reaction that is called freeze reaction, that the body gets just, you know, frozen because the brain thinks, okay, you are in danger. If you move, it's going to be worse for you. So people tend to judge, oh, why didn't you scream? Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you know? When, you know, it's a reaction of survival, you know. And it's not because the person didn't want to defend itself, you know, him or herself. It's because, you know, the body wanted to protect that. Also self-injury, you know, sometimes self-injury is very, very judged, you know, and for many survivors, you know, cutting themselves or, you know, doing something to hurt themselves is a way to reconnect with themselves. Gabor Mate talk about, you know, trauma is disconnection. And for some people, you know, trying to find a way to feel. And the other one, you know, trauma is grief. We have lost something, you know, when we experience trauma. And people tend to grieve sometimes for years. And sometimes we tend to judge that, oh, stop crying, oh, that happened, oh, you know, oh, so, you know, it's okay to grieve.
No, thank you. One word that comes to mind, and it's interesting because I think what you were saying with kids' behavior is functional. And I had a client just recently, and I asked him if I could use this. What he said is, I would like to be a functional, this is an adult, a functional human being again. And the trauma that he experienced, I won't go into detail, he would say, caused him to move from functionality to I can't function anymore. And I'd like to get back to functioning again. He's not asking for the moon. He'd like to function again. And there's just the many ways that we lose our ability to keep our ship upright.
Not a big request at all, right? Well, I think that we're going to go ahead and wrap up for the evening. I feel like we probably could talk about all of this for another few hours, and I'd be fascinated the whole time and be learning. So again, just thank you to the panel members for doing this. This was kind of a newer way for CORE to engage in these conversations. So we really appreciate all of you coming today. Any feedback is welcome. And have a great evening, everybody.
Thank